All right, let's get started. Who's ready for another semester? I don't know if I am yet, but we'll do this anyway. So how's that for the lights? I'll play with these a little bit to try to get where we like it. I think this is where I like it. Is this good? Cool. All right. And then I can do dark mode on the slides, and you can see it good since there's no lights up here. Okay. So first of all, my name is Dr. Jesse Hartloff, but I just go by Jesse. You can just call me that. We can keep it simple, keep it casual. Jesse is fine. If you like more formality, I'll still answer to Dr. Hartloff or Professor or whatever you want to use. You won't be wrong. I'll still answer you, but Jesse is fine. I guess I'll say a little bit about me. I don't know. I sometimes do, I sometimes don't. I feel like doing it a little bit today. So I did my undergrad, graduate, and I'm teaching here. I like it at UB. I like the area here. I've been other places, but I just kind of always come back here. I like the cold, so it kind of fits for me. This summer's been a bit too hot for me. But yeah, that's about me. So if you have questions about like the undergrad curriculum and grad school here, things like that, I can answer a lot of questions about that. I used to teach 199 for a while, so usually I see a lot of familiar faces when you get to 116. But this is probably the first time most of y'all have ever met me or heard of me. So I thought I'd say a little bit. Any questions about me? I'm sure you don't. All right, so let's get on with the course. So this is CSE 116. The first thing you need to know, probably the most important thing you need to know, is the course website is literally CSE116.com. And that'll give you everything you need to know about the course. I've thought about it for quite a bit of how to make it as simple as possible to find the course website, and this is what I came up with. Bless you. I don't think I can get any simpler than that. If you have an idea, I'd love to hear. If there's like a .116 domain, would be a little bit easier. CSE.116, but this is the best I can get. CSE116.com. Unless somebody adds the course, like during ad drop period, nobody should be asking me what the course website is or where to find information about the course. Everything you need will be either on this site or linked from this website. So I start off with links to some external resources that we use, and that will be a comprehensive list of everything that you need. I also use UB Learns. I just activated it today, so if you didn't see it prior to today, it should show up there. The only thing I use that for is for the classroom recordings. The Panopto recordings go automatically to UB Learns. I don't really have a choice for that. So if you want to see the recordings right after lecture, that would be the one reason to go to UB Learns. I don't even link it here because it's not really worth it. But those videos, probably from the next section, I teach two 116s back to back. So after this class, I'll be running to NSC to do this again. The second one will be uploaded to YouTube each day. That'll usually happen, when my TA gets to it. He's in charge of uploading those. Usually gets to it, by the end of the day. So if you can wait that long, I would recommend just going to YouTube. It's, a better interface and all that. But if you want to see the videos right away, they're usually posted right after class on Panopto. Then that's the only reason to go to UB Learns. Other than that, I'm not using UB Learns. I don't like UB Learns. I use it as little as possible. So let's go through these links. Autolab, you should be familiar with. I believe every 115 section uses Autolab. If you're a transfer student or if you had AP credit and you went right into 116, this is where we're going to submit our assignments. Your coding assignments will be uploaded to Autolab, and Autolab will automatically grade it and give you feedback and your score right away. You can submit as many times as you want while the assignment is out before the due date. So you can get constant feedback on your current progress. No, we don't like any of those surprises where there's a deadline, you submit your programming assignment, 2 weeks later, we finally grade it, return it, and say, oh, there's a compilation error, you get a 0. We don't like surprises like that. It's not fun for anybody. So we have Autolab, infinite submissions, as many submissions as you can make before the deadline. I recommend trying to keep your number of submissions down and think through your code and not just continuously submit. But it is what it is. You'll do what you do. So that's Autolab. It's not set up yet, I didn't upload the rosters. There's no assignments yet. There's no reason to have it yet. As we get closer to add drop, I'll start messing with that. But as we're in add drop, I have to constantly update the roster, so it gets a little annoying. I have a GitHub repo. Every example that you see in lecture will be in that repo. So if you see something in the slides and you're like, oh, wow, how does that work? I want to play with that example. Clone the repo into your IDE. If repo, IDE, clone, if none of those words make sense, don't worry. That's what we'll start with lab next week and on Wednesday. You can play with those examples, change them, modify them, run them, and just play with them to see exactly how they work on your machine. Should work exactly how I show them in lecture, but then you can change them and see how those changes affect the code. Make sure you're really understanding. Highly recommended that you actually download those examples and play with them on your own machines. Memory diagrams are going to be a big thing. I won't talk about these too much today, but memory diagrams will be a big part of your life throughout this semester. When you have lab quizzes, which again I'll explain in a little bit, they're going to be memory diagrams. You're going to get a program, you're going to get code, and you're going to have to write what the computer does while that code executes. I'll leave it at that for now. We'll talk about memory diagrams throughout the whole semester. YouTube, I already mentioned. Piazza's active, but I didn't upload the roster yet, so probably ask you to add the course. I think you can join without me adding you to Piazza, but that's where office hours will be posted. Once we have the office hour schedule, I'll change this link to go directly to the office hours post so you can see when all our, myself and TA's office hours are going to be. And asking questions, of course. I assume you're familiar with Piazza as well, that I don't have to dwell on that very much. Don't post code on public posts on Piazza is the big thing that I always have to remind the class. If you're going to post code, if you have a specific coding question about your code, make a private post to instructors, and then myself and the TAs can get to it when we see it. And finally, Discord. This, of course, is optional, but there's a Discord set up. I use the same Discord for all my classes, so there are all kinds of students in there of different degree levels. There are even quite a few alumni that hang out there. There are TAs that hang out there that'll chat with you. If you want to chat with other students, not just in this class, but throughout the whole curriculum and alumni, head over there. It's a good resource to just get in touch with people for whatever reason. When I have to give this disclaimer because I had complaints in previous semesters. The TAs, when they're on Discord, are not officially on duty. Don't expect them to behave as TAs. They will be behaving as fellow students. So if you think a TA is acting inappropriate on there, or they're not answering your coding questions, or whatever, that's fine. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Especially asking coding questions. I tell them that they can just flat out ignore your coding questions on Discord. I feel like I just said Piazza, but on Discord, they can just flat out ignore your programming questions. So just keep that in mind, that they're just fellow students there. I've had complaints before. I don't want to go through that again. So just know that if you want a professional interaction with the TAs, that's what Piazza is for. But if you're on Discord, they're going to behave differently. The same exact person is going to behave differently, myself included. I'll try to be kind of professional when I'm on Discord anyway, but I might not answer your coding questions. One big thing that I use Discord for is during lecture. There is a lecture channel on Discord. I'll have that channel open on my phone during lecture. So if you want to ask a question, or you want to ask for clarification or whatever, or you just want to say hi, I don't know, and you don't want to raise your hand and have me call on you and all that, going through that whole thing, just post it on the lecture channel in Discord. So if you see me watching my phone during lecture, don't think that I'm just ignoring you. I've been looking at my phone just now. Don't think I'm ignoring you. I'm just watching the chat. So I just said hi in there earlier, and alumni and students in previous students and TAs, they're all saying hi and stuff. Like Thrilla Perilla, I think you're new. What's up? GT0524, what's up? This is something that I kind of miss when we were online. I would actually stream my lectures on Twitch, and I had Twitch chat right there, and I'd be like, what's up, chat, and all that stupid stuff. I kind of miss that. And I had a lot more interaction with the class when I had that chat. So I like to bring that into the live classroom so I can still have a live chat. Especially, it's really effective when I make a mistake or the projector cuts out and I don't realize, but I'm watching my phone but not the projector. Chat blows up and I can find the mistake and fix it right away. Sometimes you have lectures like that where it goes a full 5 minutes where nobody wants to raise their hand and be like, Professor, the projector is black. It cut out. I'm not going to call out everybody, but it helps with those kinds of things. It's tough I never like raising my hand during a lecture, but I would get in a chat and say something. All right, so that's the external links. Let's go down with the course itself. So there's a catchphrase I have when I teach 115. I haven't taught 115 in a while, so I don't know if this caught on. I don't know if any of the instructors took on my phrase. But in 115, I like to say, we're teaching you everything you need to know to program anything. With what you know from 115, with loops and a handful of data structures, file I/O, some networking as well, databases. With what we taught you, you can do anything. Any program, any idea that you have, you can code it with just 115 knowledge. It might take you a long time, but you can definitely do it with that knowledge that you have. So what's left for 116? I don't want to invalidate my catchphrase from 115. So what's left to do here is writing large programs. So you can do anything with what you learned in 115, but you're going to get to a point where your program gets to hundreds of lines of code, thousands of lines of code, even tens of thousands of lines of code, and you're not going to quite know how to organize that. You might have everything in one giant function, or maybe you're calling a couple of functions and doing a little bit of encapsulation. But what happens when you get these really bulky, hard to maintain projects and code bases? Well, that's what a lot of the focus in 116 is going to be. And we're going to shift the focus from just getting things done to understanding how things are working. The whole first part of the course is program execution. We're going to focus on just how programs actually run. From 115 that if you type a certain sequence of characters, you can get a program to do a certain thing. We want to focus on exactly how that works. What is the computer actually doing when it takes your code and executes it? To that end, oops, I didn't delete functional programming. We don't learn functional programming anymore, RIP. But OOP, learning how to structure our code and organize our code into certain sections, I guess is the one-liner for OOP. And data structures and algorithms, you know a couple data structures right now, you know a couple algorithms right now. We're going to learn 3 more of those, linked lists, trees, and graphs, and some algorithms on how to work with them. If you've heard anything about this course, you might have heard that it's pretty hard. I have certain expectations. I like to get these out on day one. I don't know if this is a waste of time on day one or not, saying this stuff, because I feel like you hear this a lot, and a lot of the times it's not really true. But in this course, my big expectation is that you spend at least 12 hours per week on CSE 116. Now, 5 of that is lecture and lab. So then 7 more hours outside of lecture and lab, studying the material, programming the assignments, and I guess that's mostly it, studying and doing the program assignments. Some students tell me that this estimate is way too low still. I do say that this is a minimum. You should be spending at least 12 hours a week. And some students tell me that they spend way more than that on the program assignments. Some of the program assignments they're a lot. They're tough, they're challenging, and mostly while you're doing the assignment, you're reviewing and learning the material as you go, understanding what was covered in lecture and trying to turn that into code. It takes a while. The 12 hours a week estimate is based on a student coming into 116 knowing all of the 115 concepts. With the exception, I get this question a lot, but with the exception of the web stuff, the database stuff, and the security stuff, which we actually are cutting from 115. I believe this semester is the first semester. Unfortunately, y'all had to go through the old one, or fortunately, depending on your view. But we are cutting that because we don't require it here or later anyway. But It's a long story. But and we also cut functional programming from 116 because these courses tend to kick your asses quite a bit. So we're trying to address that as best we can. So it does assume that you know the 115. You should be a pro at loops, data structures, control flow. Like you should know that stuff inside and out. You should know how to write a program that goes through counts the prime numbers or something like that. You should be at that level. That should be an easy question for you. If it's not, then expect that 12, which is fine if it's not, by the way, if you don't know the 115 material inside and out. But if it's not, just expect that 12 hours per week to be more than 12 hours per week, because you have to spend some time catching up on the 115 material that you might just be rusty on. I mean, summer's long. It's easy to forget a lot of stuff over summer. So catching up on that and then doing the 116 stuff in addition. Yeah. So modules 1 and 2 for sure. You should know modules 1 and 2 inside and out. If modules 3 and 4 you're a little fuzzy on, you'll get away with that pretty easy. And with an emphasis on the concepts of 115. You won't write any Python or JavaScript in this in 116. It'll be Scala, for those wondering. But you need to understand the concept. If I have a conditional and I say if some Boolean expression, then this code is executed, else this code is executed, like that's the kind of stuff you need to know inside and out. If I have a for loop that iterates over a data structure, you need to know that that's executing that code once per element in that data structure. You need to know that stuff inside and out. I assume you want to learn computer science. I'm not going to read everything to you. There's no lab week 1. Labs will start next week. Luckily, we don't have any Monday labs, so Labor Day doesn't mess up our schedule. We're starting lab next week. I have an internet connection, which I'm surprised. Usually the internet goes out on the first day of classes every day. I don't want to jinx it, but it's 1:17 and it's still going. This is great. And if you need help with CSE 115 review, here's some resources for you. All right, so what are we going to learn specifically in 116? We're going to learn 3 main categories of things. I call them learning objectives. And each category, of course, has a bunch of concepts in it. What types of data structures should you know before this class? At least 1 sequential data structure and 1 key value store. So in JavaScript, that would be an array and an object. In Python, that would be a list and a dictionary. I expect you to know those 2 data structures, those 2 types. Then we'll learn our own sequential type of data structure, which will be a list. We'll call it a list in Scala, which will be based on a linked list, and a map, which will be our key value store. That's the 2 we're going to start with right away. And then it won't be till later in the semester where we'll throw out linked lists, trees, and graphs. Yes? Sorry, what was that? No textbooks. So I'll have links to any relevant resources in the course schedule. There's no textbook. You don't have to buy anything for this course. So each learning objective, each of the 3 learning objectives will be split into 3 parts. Read, explain, and write. For each topic of the course that I teach, I want you to be able to read code that implements that topic, which will be our memory diagrams. You'll be given a piece of code in a quiz, and you have to draw what actually happens when that code executes. Write is writing code, of course. It's a programming class. You're going to be writing a lot of code. And finally, explain the concepts of each learning objective. You'll be having interviews with the TAs, and they'll ask you questions about the concepts of that learning objective, and you have to answer those questions satisfactorily. You have to be able to hold a conversation about these. This is one of the most important skills after you graduate, is being able to have a conversation, a very technical conversation with your coworkers. You're always going to be working in a team these days when you get out there in industry. And I want you all to have some practice actually communicating about these concepts. It's one thing to be able to write a program that uses polymorphism, but can you just talk to me about polymorphism? If I say, what is polymorphism? Can you actually explain what that is, or can you just write some code with it? We have a bad tendency in computer science to just focus on the writing code, mostly, to be honest, because it's easy to grade. We write our auto graders. You can submit 1 billion times, and I don't have to do any extra work after I write one grader. It's easy to grade. But we need to get you those skills where you can actually discuss about code, because that's what you'll be doing your whole career. I've talking to a lot of people in industry. They spend less than half their time writing code. Most of the time, they're having meetings and talking about code, planning out architecture for code, and thinking about how they're going to get things done. And then some of their time actually getting the things done. Very important skill that I would really like every graduate to have. So the learning objectives are: 1, program execution. I'm not going through all these. You can read them. But program execution, this is mostly the intro to Scala thing, intro to Scala learning objective. We'll also throw in testing. We're going to talk about unit testing, and you write a whole bunch of tests for your code to automate testing. And also, we're going to introduce memory and memory diagrams. We're going to move into OOP, which will include classes, objects, inheritance, polymorphism, and the state pattern. And then data structures and algorithms are linked lists, trees, graphs, and algorithms, working with those. You need to complete all 3 learning objectives, all 3 parts of all 3 learning objectives. So 3 interviews, 3 quizzes, and 3 programming assignments, programming tasks. I haven't introduced those yet, but I will in a second. To complete all 3 learning objectives, if you don't pass the class. These are the things that I need you to know coming out of 116, because this is what I need you to know, what your future instructors need you to know going into 220 and 250. This is the base fundamental stuff that you need to know to be successful. If you can't complete all 3 of these learning objectives, it will be, I won't say you can't, but it would be extremely difficult for you to succeed in 220 and 250, to move forward into those classes and move on with the computer science curriculum. So my job is to make sure that you know that stuff coming out of 116, and I'm going to be as clear as possible. You need to do those things. You need to complete all 3 learning objectives to pass the class. If you do complete all 3 learning objectives, your grade will be based on application objectives. I'll introduce those in more detail after I talk about the learning objectives, because I just said you need to complete all 3 of these to pass the class. I'm sure you're wondering how you complete those, more so than worrying about improving your grade after. But for now, even if you complete 0 application objectives, but you do complete the learning objectives, I'm going to say, yeah, you're good to go for 220, 250. Even 0 application objectives, you're still passing the class. And then you can earn application objectives to improve your grade after that. So how do we pass these learning objectives? How do we complete them? It's going to be 3 parts: read, write, explain. Read is going to be lab quizzes. So each learning objective is going to have 2 labs, 2 verification labs associated with it. They're on the schedule. You can look at the schedule and see exactly when they'll be. 2 verification labs. During that verification lab, you're going to have a quiz, which you can take up to the entire lab time to complete, and an interview, which is going to take 10 minutes out of that lab time. So the quiz, you have 1 hour and 40 minutes to complete, and then 10 minutes of that, a TA will call you up for your interview, and you'll interview with the TA. So the quiz is going to be a memory diagram. You'll get that snippet of code. I feel like I said this 3 times already, but you get a snippet of code, and you have to draw out the memory diagram. And it will be a pass-fail quiz. This is a pass-fail basis. We're going to review it with humans. We're going to look at it and decide if you've demonstrated an adequate depth of knowledge to be able to check you off for that learning objective. If you complete it, of course, you're done with that read. It's a check mark. You got read, explain, write for each learning objective. It's pass-fail. You're checked off or not. So if you complete that, then you're good to go on that. If you don't, there will be a second chance lab for each quiz and interview, where you get another chance for free. You just go take it again. It'll, of course, be different questions, but you just take it again. Same with the interview. If you don't pass the interview, you go to the second chance lab, and you try it again. You study, you brush up on the material. You go there, you try it again. So you get 2 chances for each quiz and interview. If you complete the quiz and interview on the first lab, I should have prefaced this, I usually do. The grading structure in this class is very different than things you've seen before. Like I'll take up this whole lecture just explaining all this stuff. It is very different. I think it's worthwhile. I really like this grading structure because it helps you focus on the education. My tagline for this is you focus on learning the material, and then it's my job to check you off for these learning objectives. I'll do what I can to figure out that you did actually complete all the learning objectives. And if you know in your heart that you actually know all this stuff and you've completed the learning objectives, that you can do this stuff, then it's my job to make sure you pass the class. So that's the spirit behind all of this. If you pass the lab quiz and interview the first time around, you don't have to show up to the second chance lab. You get a week off of lab. There's no point in you coming. If you pass just the interview, you go and take the quiz. If you pass just the quiz, you go and take just the interview. And we try to get the interviews. If you have the interview but not the quiz, we try to do you earlier in the lab and things like that. So you get 2 chances, and then for each of those, and then the right portion. The programming assignments, this is where you'll spend a lot of your time outside of lecture and lab, of course. This is what you'll spend a lot of your time doing. For each learning objective, there will be a project with 3 programming tasks, each associated with a week of content of the course. So I'm going to introduce all the concepts. Like this week, we're going to learn just basic intro to Scala. And then each task has 2 deadlines. One is the Wednesday after the week where the material is covered. So next Wednesday at 9 a.m. will be what we call expected deadline for Project 1, Task 1. Project 1 will be released on Wednesday, so we can get started on that. And then a week after that will be what I call the actual deadline for the programming tasks. So we have an expected deadline and an actual deadline. The actual deadline is the deadline you need to complete that task before in order to get credit towards your right portion of your learning objective. If you complete all 3 of those programming tasks before their actual deadlines, then you've completed the right portion of that learning objective. Clear enough? I struggle with the exact way to word all that. It's a mouthful. All right, so you get 2 chances to do the quiz, to do the read portion. You get the 2 labs on the schedule. You get 2 chances to do the interview. There's 2 verification labs on the schedule. And you get 2 chances to do each of the right portions, each of the programming tasks. You have the expected deadline, which is realistically where you should have it done. That's why it's the expected deadline. That's where you should have it completed by the Wednesday after we learned about it in class. I think that's a reasonable deadline for completing that programming task. You work on it, you go to lecture, you take what you know, learned, and then apply it to the programming task that week as it's being presented, and then you have a few extra days in the following week to catch up if you fell a little bit behind. But when I say, well, you have to complete all these before the deadline or else you fail the class, it's like, oh shit, I can't do that. Or else I'm going to get a billion emails, and rightfully so. So the following week, a whole extra week, is what you have to complete it in order to complete that learning objective, which I think is plenty of time. So you have 2 chances. I see that as 2 chances to do each programming task when you should have it done, and then a free 1-week extension on every single programming task. But I realize that's still a bit harsh, especially when you miss 1 task deadline and all of a sudden you're done. That's still way too harsh. So there are recovery opportunities. All of you will get 4 of what's called recovery opportunities. Each recovery opportunity is a chance to get an extra chance on any one of those objectives that you need to do. This is either a 3rd chance to take a quiz, a 3rd chance to take an interview, or an additional 1-week extension on any programming task. So, things happen. You get caught up with something else, whatever. I don't care what the excuse is. You get 4 free ones for whatever reason at all. You didn't get a test done online on time. You just get a 1-week extension. So for those, a few caveats. You can't use these on recovery opportunities. I had someone try that last semester. and you can use multiple recovery opportunities on the same thing. So if you need 5 chances to do one quiz that just happens to not be hitting your brain quite right, it's taking you a while to learn it, you need 5 chances for that thing, fine. Use 3 of your recovery opportunities on that one quiz, it's fine. If you have one programming task that you just can't figure out for the life of you, and you need 4 weeks of extension on this one task, that's fine. You can use all 4 of your recovery opportunities on a single task. There's only one restriction to this. I do eventually have to post final grades, so you can't extend a test deadline past the Wednesday of finals week. So you can, whatever's due, Project 3, Task 3 is going to have a deadline of the last Wednesday of the last week of classes. You can use 1 recovery opportunity on that task, but you can't use more than that because I have a final grades deadline I have to upload to the hub. I have to upload your grades. Okay, it's a lot. Let's take a little breather. Any questions on any of this? It's very different than homework's 20%, projects are 30%. It's very different than that kind of grading structure. So I hope you have questions. Yes?
So how do you keep track of it?
It'll all be on Autolab. So how do we keep track of all this? For one, I have a whole bunch of spreadsheets and stuff where I keep track of all this stuff. To make sure that we're on the same page, I'll post everything to Autolab. You'll have separate categories, separate assignments that you won't have any submissions for or anything, but I'll have an assignment that says recovery opportunities. I think I call it recovery opportunities used. And you can click on that. It'll give you the number of recovery opportunities you used and what you used them for. Each quiz, we'll post your results on Autolab. Each interview, we'll post your results there. So you have all that information on Autolab. And if anything on there doesn't sync up with what you think you should have, make sure you let me know and I can correct it. Yes? Yes, Scala's free. So I recommend using, I'll talk about this on Wednesday in more depth, but I recommend using IntelliJ, the ultimate version or professional version. I forget what fancy adjective they use for it. But download the ultimate one, the cooler one. It is paid software, but you get a free educational license. So put in your buffalo.edu address, apply for an educational license, and then you can get the ultimate version. If you don't feel like doing that for whatever reason, you can use the community version, that's free. So you can use that. Community version will do everything you need in this class, but if you want to use IntelliJ for a project outside of this class, the ultimate version just has a lot more features for you. For example, it does JavaScript in addition to Scala, Java, Kotlin, all kinds of other stuff. But the community version will be fine for you. Do we get extra credit if we don't use any of the recovery opportunities? No. Can we use VS Code? Yes. So extra credit for not using recovery opportunities? No, I don't want recovery opportunities to... at the late last semester, I ended up giving some form of, I forget what exactly it was, but some form of benefit for not using them. I don't want to do that again because I don't want to put the impression out there that you shouldn't be using the recovery opportunities. Like, I don't know, maybe you have a family member getting married one week and you don't want to be messing around with my programming tasks. I want you to just feel comfortable in saying, you know what, I'll just use a recovery opportunity. That's no big deal. I don't want you to be punished later in the semester for using these things. They're there for you to use to reduce your stress levels and to let you catch up if you start falling behind a little bit. I don't want to reward you for not using them. Can we use VS Code? Yes. So programming submissions will be zip files. As long as you submit all your code as a zip file to Autolab, and Autolab should be able to read it. The code I have there to open, unzip, and find your code is pretty robust. As long as you submit Scala code that's valid, I don't care what ID you use or lack thereof. If you like your text editors or whatever, you can use whatever you want. The examples and support for the class will be for IntelliJ. So if you want to use something like VS Code or Vim or whatever you want, just don't expect support from myself or the TAs. We can't support 10 different programming environments. You might be able to find a TA that can help you, but I'm not requiring them to know every ID. Yes? Yeah, week 7. Yeah. Because the fall semester is dumb, and I hate it. So each spring semester we have spring break. It's a week off right in the middle of the semester. And fall break we don't get that. Fall semester we don't get that. We don't get a break. We have to make it all the way till fall break to finally get a breather. I don't like that. I haven't met any student who likes that. So right in the middle of the semester, week 7, which is where most of your other classes will be having midterms. That week, I'm going to step back and be like, 116 is not going to ask anything of you this week, and I'm not going to show up to class. Just so you don't worry that I'm like skipping out on you or whatever, I'll be in my office during lecture time, and I'll just hold extra office hours that week. So I'm not letting myself off the hook, but we can get extra office hours. There's no deadlines. There's no lab. Week 7, I treat it as just a void in the schedule. So effectively, according to my external planning, week 8 is week 7. Everything's just pushed back a week. There were a lot of discussions with the faculty senate. They were trying to figure out a way to give us a break in the middle of fall, and they didn't come up with anything. They were going to give us a half a week, which just puts everything off kilter. It just messes up like lab schedules and stuff. They got to give us a full week or nothing, and they ended up doing nothing. So you have to convert .scala to .zip for the autograder. Yeah, well, you have to zip up your entire project. With I believe the exception of project 1, do I have that as a single one? All the projects will be multiple files. So just to be able to submit multiple files, we use zip. All right, any questions on learning objectives and what you need to do to pass the class before we start talking about application objectives? I know it's a lot of information there. Of course, you can reread the syllabus and ask questions throughout the semester. Once all these things become more pertinent, like once we're coming up on the first verification lab, I'll talk about this again. I'll take some lecture time and chat with y'all and answer your questions. It might be a little early to really have more questions than that. But for learning objectives, just my last words on it are, if you're focusing on learning the material, you shouldn't really have to worry about the learning objectives. If you're just watching the deadlines, getting your programming tasks done, showing up to the verification labs with some good knowledge in your head, you shouldn't have to worry about them. They're not meant to be strict. And by that I mean the bar isn't too high for each of those. For each quiz, interview, the tasks aren't meant to be too difficult. But they're just measuring, like, have you paid attention in class, and can you, have you learned what you're supposed to learn? I know it's intimidating at first because you have to complete all of them, but I don't think it's too bad. And historically, I've been doing this for a few years now with this grading structure. Historically, it's not too bad. I think students overall enjoy it. It's less stressful than a lot of other courses. For example, there's no, how much time do I have? Yeah, so one thing I don't like in any of my courses, I don't want the feature where if you have one bad day, your grade can tank. We don't have that in this course. For all the quizzes, interviews, programming tests, like you have multiple opportunities to complete those. Even the application objectives, there's no like one time where you have a bad day that day and all of a sudden you can't get an A anymore. I don't like that. Some classes have that. You have a bad day on the midterm day and you're not feeling great and you bomb the test. Like that, there goes your whole semester in a lot of classes. I don't like that. So the learning objectives on the surface does seem strict, but once you get into it, I hope at least you'll agree, and previous semesters of students have agreed, that it is more lax, it's more chill than a lot of grading structures that are just percentage-based and exams and all that stuff. There is an exam, which I'm about to talk about, but it's pretty low stress. All right, so application objectives. This is where you're improving your grade. You passed, you got all the learning objectives, you got your C- locked up. Application objectives is where you're climbing the ladder up to an A. There are 10 of these in the course. 3 of them are going to be on the programming projects. Each programming project has the 3 tasks you need to complete to pass. They'll also have a 4th one that's going to be labeled an application objective. And you complete that and you earn an application objective. Just straight up 1 for 1. You complete that task, Autolab says you're good, you got an application objective. If you complete it before the deadline, of course. So it's pretty straightforward. The expected deadlines, I mentioned that each programming task, each of the 9 tasks has an expected deadline and an actual deadline. So what's the point of the expected deadlines? Well, it's to encourage you to get your work done when you realistically should have it done. You should have them done by that Wednesday. But I understand things happen. You're not always going to get them done. But to encourage you to get them done by the expected deadline, you complete 5 out of 9 before the expected deadline. You got yourself an application objective. 7 out of 9, you got yourself 2 application objectives. So if you're keeping up on the material, which I really want to encourage you, I have it written in here. A lot of you might have read it, but I didn't say it out loud. It's really hard to catch up in this course if you fall behind. I've had, I don't want to talk about that, but it's really hard to catch up. I don't think I've ever seen a student catch up once they fall like 3 weeks behind on tasks. You can't catch up. So to encourage you to not get in that position, here's some application objectives for keeping up on stuff. Because I don't want to see anybody fail, by the way. I want you to keep up on stuff and stay on top of it. I have a lot built in here to make sure you can still pass even if you do fall a little behind. But really, just stay on top of things, and then I can see all of you pass. It'd be phenomenal. I'd love it. The quizzes and final exam. So each first chance verification quiz, you'll have an opportunity to earn an application objective. So there's 2 bars for each quiz. There's 1 bar you have to overcome to complete the learning objective. That bar isn't too bad. It's not meant to be strict. It's not meant to be difficult. It's meant to be do you know the basics of this learning objective? Then there's another bar for the application objective. Have you shown that you really know your stuff? Do you have a great depth of knowledge on this material? You did your memory diagrams and they're flawless. That's going to, or at least close to. You can make little mistakes and still get the AO. Application objective. So if you do really well on that first quiz, I don't know what I'm highlighting, but if you do very good on that first quiz, you'll get an application objective. If you don't, you can't earn that on the second chance, and you can't earn it if you use the recovery opportunity to take a 3rd quiz or 4th or 5th or 6th. You can't earn that, but you do get another chance on the final exam. So the final exam is going to be a chance to earn any of these 3 or all of these 3 application objectives if you miss them on the quizzes the first time around. So the final exam is just to get any first quiz application objectives that you missed. That means if you completed all 3 of those application objectives on those quizzes the first time around, there's no reason for you to show up to the final exam. No final exam for you. You can just go enjoy your time, study for other exams, do whatever you want to do. I don't care what you do. You already got all your application objectives. So if you miss any, you only have to take the ones on the final that you did miss. So if you missed the first learning objective quiz application objective, that's a mouthful. But you get the next 2 on 2 and 3. You show up to the final exam and you only do section 1, learning objective 1 on the final exam. You don't need to do the other 2 because you already have credit for that. So again, I don't want one day to mess you up. You have 1 bad quiz, just do it on the final. You have a bad day on the final, well, that means you also had bad days on the quizzes, and at that point, are you learning? Did you learn what you were supposed to learn? But 1 bad day isn't going to hurt you here. So I always like that feature in my classes. And finally, lecture questions, not much to talk about here. These will mostly be multiple choice. They'll be submitted on Autolab, which is a little bit of a pain. They won't be auto-graded. I do it manually. I got to figure out a better way to do it. But it's better than Top Hat. I'm not going to make you pay for Top Hat. But lecture questions, most lectures will have lecture questions. They're meant to be pretty easy and just checking whether or not you're following along in class and conscious. A lot of students, since I record lectures and post them on YouTube and everything, you can watch them at 2 times speed or whatever. It's very tempting to fall behind by a week or two, which I just talked about. Like, it's very tough to catch up. So lecture questions are there to encourage you to stay up to date on the course material, showing up to lectures and getting these things done. You get at least 60% of them. You get an application objective, at least 80%, you get 2. Again, I don't want to be strict about it. If you have to miss 2 weeks of class even, I want you to still be able to get both application objectives there. I didn't do the math on that. Is 80%, could you miss 2 weeks? I don't know. Yes?
Okay, so I got a question that's not really related to my fifth part.
Sure.
What's the percentage of people you would say either drop or fail the class?
It's about 30%,
Okay.
which I'd like that to be lower. I've seen it as high as 50%, which a lot of this course structure was in response to that. Like the course was the same when I've seen 50%, but it was built in a way that you could fall behind and not really feel consequences until you get an F at the end of the semester. I was trying to be super lenient and, well, it doesn't work. So a lot of this is just built to encourage you to stay on track, because once you fall behind, I'm being repetitive at this point, but it's as low as 30 because of all the structure, and I'm constantly trying to get that even lower. I would love to see that at 0. Would be really nice. Yeah.
How much is success in 115 sort of indicative that you would do well in this class?
So if you're successful in 115, you won't necessarily be successful in 116. I'd say most students who, I've looked at the data, I'd say most students who get A's in 115 get, pass at the very least 116. But once it's like a B or lower in 115, those students tend to struggle in 116. So doing poorly in 115 does indicate you're going to have a tough time in 116. But the converse is, for the most part, true, but not necessarily. I've seen students who get A's in 115 and don't do well in 116. So don't get too comfortable if you got an A in 115. But if you got like a B or lower in 115, the numbers get a lot worse for those students. And that's why I have my speech in the earlier part of this lecture, that if you're not really up to date on the 115 material, you have a lot more work to do in 116, because you got to learn that stuff. No textbook for the course. I have links to relevant material. Department policies, the university makes me put this section here. And finally, academic integrity. I have to talk about this a little bit. I don't like belaboring this because I feel like you hear about this in every single class. So I don't want to belabor it too much, but I want to highlight the points that I really need to talk about. If 2 submissions are sufficiently similar, both those students committed AI, and they're both subject to an F in the course. All violations will be an F. I don't do like zeros on the assignment or anything. Both students are in violation. I don't care if you were the one cheating or the one giving your code away. And this is always the most frustrating part of the AI talk, is everyone who's not listening are going to be the ones that I have to fail, and I hate it. I hate it. So if you do cheat, expect to have an unfortunate meeting with me. I've had students cry in my office. I hate these meetings and stuff, but if you cheat, I'm not going to mess around. Like, it's going to be an F. You're going to have a meeting with me, and you're going to fail the course. And the one thing that is the most common form of cheating is 2 students sitting next to each other and working on an assignment together. And they usually, or at least what they tell me, is that they don't think they were cheating, but they did cross a line where their submissions were so similar that I'm not convinced that they both could actually complete the assignment on their own, and that's 2 Fs. It sucks. It sucks every time. Don't do it. Don't fall in that position. But this is by far the most common situation that I have in my office. And that's it. See everybody Wednesday. We're going to start learning Scala on Wednesday.